It is Thursday, August 15th. I'm Bernice Hillier, filling in for Adam Walsh. This is The Signal on CBC Radio. Today, our topic is tinnitus or tinnitus, however you say it. Hearing a ringing or buzzing sound in their heads is something millions of Canadians live with. We'll be talking about what tinnitus is and what can help. Well, if you have tinnitus, we would love to hear from you on the show today. The numbers to call are 1-800-563-8255. You can also call 709-722-7111. Get your calls in early and tell us about maybe your experience with tinnitus or tinnitus, however you say it. And also, you might have a question for our guests, who I'm going to introduce in just a moment. I want to also tell you that you can text us with your question or comment. The number to do that is 709-327-8206 during the live show. And you can send us an email as well. thesignal@cbc.ca is how you get in touch by email. We have some guests on The Signal today who know about tinnitus, either through their professional training and career or through personal experience of having tinnitus themselves. And in one case, the person has both professional information as well as having personal experience. We have two guests who will be with us through most of the show today. Taylor Burt is an audiologist and president of the Newfoundland and Labrador Association of Speech-Language Pathologists and Audiologists. She joins us from Grand Falls, Windsor this afternoon. Good afternoon, Taylor.
Hi, Bernice.
And we're also joined by a guest in our St. John's studio today. Andrea Augo is Coordinator of Client Services with the Canadian Hard of Hearing Association of Newfoundland and Labrador. She also has hearing loss and tinnitus. Good afternoon, Andrea.
Hello, Bernice.
Well, I'm glad that you're both with us, and we'll kind of set the scene for people so they can understand a little bit about, I guess, what we're talking about in the first place. I think people who have tinnitus know very well what we're talking about, but it's hard for others to imagine. So first of all, before we get into how it affects people and how to cope and find some relief, let's get a definition so people do know what we're talking about. Taylor, as an audiologist, how do you define tinnitus or tinnitus?
So tinnitus, by the textbook definition, is somebody hearing a ringing either in their ears or sometimes more in their head, but it's in the absence of an actual physical sound.
And how does medical science explain that?
It's still being heavily researched at this point. It can be related to hearing loss or damage to the cochlea or our hearing organ. But there also can be tinnitus present without hearing loss itself. They can be related to a number of different medical conditions as well. So there's a number of different causes.
Now, Andrea, we've said that you have tinnitus or tinnitus. How do you explain it to someone when someone says, well, what is that? What do you hear?
Right. So for me, how I describe it is it's a sound in my head that no one else can hear. And it's really bizarre because people can't hear it. So, you can't see it. It's invisible and it's in my head and I hear it. Right now, I hear it's sort of like a dial tone on a telephone.
Now, I think for many of us, it is hard to imagine what you're talking about. I looked on the internet yesterday, and there are websites where you can listen to short bits of audio that are meant to be what tinnitus might sound like for individuals. Now, I couldn't possibly let our listeners today endure some of those sounds for very long. So I'll give a warning. I have cut a 10-second clip together of some of the frequencies and types of sounds that people who have tinnitus hear. So bear with me. We're going to play a very short clip now, just 10 seconds. If you're listening to your radio, you'll know it's going to end very soon. So what you heard there is a very short, edited version of a video posted to YouTube by a United Kingdom online health service called MedicSpot. Andrea, do any of those sounds we just heard compare with what you hear as you experience tinnitus?
Definitely. The one that sounds like a roaring sound. Yeah, I hear that one as well. I hear a lot of different sounds.
And, I mean, we just listened to 10 seconds, and most of us could hardly endure that, probably. What is it like for you, day to day, to be hearing a sound that no one else can hear, but it is very much present for you?
So for me, basically, every day, just as an example, when I wake up in the morning, it's there. So I'm quick to put on my hearing device. When I put on my hearing device, the sound is, it's there, but it's sort of like in the background. So it's not, I'm not focused on it, and I go about my day and I'm getting ready to go to work. And as long as I'm not focused on it, I can manage it. I do know that there's lots of people that have great difficulty with it in terms of controlling it. So for me, I feel I have a good handle on it, and I don't feel that it's severe enough that I can't function in day-to-day life, basically, because obviously I am functioning, I am working, but it is there, and even us talking about it today is bringing it on for me. So I'm hearing a high-pitch sound. Yeah.
Taylor, a 10-second clip like we just listened to can't possibly capture how annoying, how overwhelming, how distracting tinnitus can be for people who have it. What do you hear from patients about what their tinnitus sounds like and how it affects them?
Well, just as Andrea described there, it's a kind of range of different sounds. I've heard it described as like a ringing or like a dial tone, more of a hissing sound. I've heard it described as like the buzzing of electricity and power lines, or like fluorescent lights, those kinds of things. And there are a number of different emotional impacts and impacts that it can have on your day. One of the number one reports that I get from patients, and really around the world, is the disruption of sleep. So either trying to get to sleep and kind of blocking that out of your head, not focusing on it, or waking up in the middle of the night and being unable to go back to sleep. As Andrea had mentioned there, going about your day when your environment is really rich in different sounds and loud sounds, soft sounds, is not quite as difficult, but it's those kind of silent moments where people certainly struggle the most.
You're listening to The Signal on CBC Radio 1. Today we're talking about tinnitus, and if you have a question about it, or if you want to tell us about your experience, text us, email us, call us. The numbers to call are 1-800-563-8255 or 709-722-7111. You can text us 709-327-8206. You can send us an email as well, thesignal@cbc.ca. Andrea, you can remember exactly when your tinnitus started. So take some time now to tell us that story, if you can.
Sure. I recall, and my mother would recall this moment as well. It was in the middle of the night, and I was probably about 10 years old. And so in the middle of the night, I wake up, and I could not get back to sleep. I'm hearing this loud, I guess it was a high-pitched sound, and, I had my hands over my ears, and I woke up crying, and my mom came in the room and, trying to console me, and I tried to explain to her what was happening, and, she didn't know what was happening, and she couldn't hear what I was hearing. So, so I remember that like it was yesterday, and that's when it started for me. And back in the 80s, there really wasn't, much information about tinnitus. So, my mother took me to the doctor. They really didn't know what it was about. I was already seeing an ears, nose, and throat specialist, which related to my hearing loss, because I was diagnosed with hearing loss when I was 4 years old. So I wore hearing aids, and and it was just like all of a sudden I heard this sound in the middle of the night, and it took quite some time for me to get used to it in terms of going to sleep. But it wasn't back then as a child, it wasn't there every single night. It was sort of like it would come and go. So after a period of time, after my hearing just deteriorated over the years, I started to notice it was there all the time. So when I took my hearing aids out at night, that's when it was there. So it was difficult I guess I had to train myself to live with it and just not think about it and just try to lull myself to sleep. So there's technology that can help, such as sound conditioners, for example. So, or there could be apps on cell phones. So you could listen to sound to sort of like block out what you're hearing in your head. But for me, I can't take advantage of that because technically, without my hearing devices, I am deaf, so I can't hear anything from an app or a sound conditioner machine.
Taylor, what do you hear from people about how their tinnitus began? Because we just heard from Andrea about experiencing that as a young child and not really understanding what it was and how she's learned to cope with it.
It's really varied in the same way that the sound of the tinnitus is varied. In some cases, it comes about when people are after working around noise for many years, and that can, for some people, be the first sign that there has been some damage to their ears, those cells and nerves in their ears, even before they notice any hearing loss as a result of that. So sometimes that's the kind of thing that gets people in the clinic. Other times it is with people that have an existing hearing loss. That would be like in Andrea's case, where the tinnitus comes on later on after they've got an established hearing loss. And other times it can be, like I said, secondary to like a medical condition. So some people, if they have wax blocking up their ears, they'll hear a ringing sound, and that then prompts them to go into the doctor and get that cleaned out and situated.
And Taylor, you and I were talking on the phone a few days ago, and you mentioned that tinnitus is a symptom, not a diagnosis. Just explain what you mean by that and why it is important that people do get checked out.
Absolutely, and that's exactly right. It's a symptom and not a diagnosis. So the tinnitus is not necessarily a guarantee that you have hearing loss. As I said before, you can have ringing in the ears with ears that are plugged with wax. You can have ringing in the ears even in the presence of an ear infection. I'm sure if there's any listeners out there that have had a really, really bad ear infection in the last little while, they probably experienced that to some degree. It also comes with more chronic conditions, like things like Meniere's disease, where the tinnitus is like a known symptom of that disorder and can help us in diagnosing it. But you never know what that could be in all of those different categories if you don't come in and get it checked out further. Certainly, and see your doctor to have a look in your ears and make sure everything is okay. So that there is it certainly a starting point for a lot of people.
Taylor, is it possible that sometimes people will never know exactly what caused their tinnitus in the beginning?
Absolutely. There is, in the way that we have done a lot of research, I'm going to say, since Andrea first had her tinnitus in the 80s, but it's still a really heavily researched topic. And even in the little bit of research that I did to prep myself for this interview, there's still a vast majority of tinnitus that goes largely, it's idiopathic. It goes without an actual diagnosis.
Now, some people who have tinnitus can trace back the start of their symptoms, as we've just heard, to a specific point in time. It might have been during a recreational activity or work around the house, mowing the lawn, or work at paid employment when they first noticed this, that they had symptoms of tinnitus. Workplace NL has a department that is focused on preventing occupational disease and injuries of all kinds, including hearing loss. Aaron Jones is industrial hygienist with the Prevention Services Department of Workplace NL. And I spoke with him and started by asking him to talk generally about how much of a concern noise and hearing protection are in his work.
When we're talking about noise, usually, being exposed to excessive noise over your career can lead to illnesses later in your life, likely retirement age, like you were talking about there, tinnitus, various forms of hearing loss and damage. Over the last 5 years, we're averaging about 200 claims related specifically to hearing loss. And over those 5 years, it's approximately resulted in a financial cost of about $19 million.
So 200 claims per year on average?
Yep, just with respect to hearing loss.
And what in a workplace might be a concern when it comes to hearing loss? What are some of the risk factors in a workplace?
When it comes to your workplace, one of the most important things you can do is do a proper hazard assessment. And that would involve, it could be a simple thing like just walking through a facility. It could be an office, could be like a fabrication shop, whatever your workplace is. And you want to look for things that might be, of concern, like loud motors, pumps, things like that. The type of work people are doing, are they working around like conveyor belts, machinery, automated stuff? Are they, working sheet metal? There's two solid objects colliding, things like that. If you're ever in your workplace and you almost you find yourself having to raise your voice or lean in to talk to someone, that will be a good indication that there's elevated noise in your workplace too. So those are things you want to look for in your workplace. And if you're suspicious or you suspect any of those things, it's important that you get a proper noise assessment done of your facility.
How can an employee know if really something like that needs to happen, if they need an assessment done or if hearing protection is required?
Gotcha. Yeah. Like you say, if you suspect there's elevated noise in your workplace, you might get some worker complaints, or through your hazard assessment, you're suspicious of elevated noise. You can reach out to a third-party consultant and get them to do some personal noise dosimetry at the workplace. So what that would involve is a worker doing their work test. They'll wear a device on their lapel, and that device is going to record the noise that they're exposed to over their work shift. And then at the end of the session, if you will, you'll take that data from the device, and that'll give you, the average noise they were exposed to, and actually to the maximum peak noise that they were exposed to. With respect to knowing how much of that noise is dangerous, here in Newfoundland and Labrador, we reference the American Conference of Governmental Industrial Hygienists guidelines for noise exposure. So they offer two different threshold limit values that we need to adhere to. One is for continuous noise. So continuous noise, a good example, if you picture, let's say, working on a vessel, like on a boat, down in the engine room, you've got that constant noise being emitted from the engine running. Impact or impulsive noise is the other threshold limit value. So as the name implies, it's a result of a brief exposure to intense sound. So similar on a boat again, if you think about like the steel deck, if if something like you're lowering a piece of cargo or something down on the deck, metal on metal, you get that collision, you get that brief duration, the brief impulse of noise coming at you. Or another good example of impact or impulse noise would be like a gunshot. It's just, a loud bang kind of thing, right? Or a result of an explosion. So like say, based on the results we get back from our noise session, that'll determine then if we're above either one of those thresholds, we're going to have to put in hazard controls then to reduce that worker exposure. So some things we could do would be like an engineering control, similar to like a stadium. You might look up in the stadium rafters, you might see like some rubber matting being suspended from the ceiling. that helps too. Just catch reverberations and lower the sound within the room. And like last resort would be implementing protective hearing devices, so like earplugs, earmuffs, right?
How aware do you think most of us are of the dangers that loud noises can cause to our hearing, whether it be continuous noise like you've talked about or that sudden impact noise? You know, we're all aware, it seems, of how dangerous it can be to work from heights. But are we as aware as we should be, perhaps, of the dangers of loud noises?
I think for these, I think it's gaining more traction as time goes on. Like I say, a lot of prevention campaigns and things like that, different organizations, including ourselves, are helping educate the workforce, and that's really an important factor on bringing that that knowledge to the workforse.
And do you have claims sometimes specifically related to tinnitus or tinnitus?
We do, yeah. Like I say, there's a wide array of different claims we do receive, but tinnitus would be one of those, yeah. And like you say, it's unfortunate that it does happen, but like you say, as these programs become more robust, we're going to hopefully, we're going to see a reflection of that in the amount of claims coming in going forward, right?
How life-changing can it be when someone has a hearing loss or injury?
It can be quite dramatic, Bernice. If you think of all the things you enjoy for day to day, you might take for granted. You're going to make a left-hand turn in your car, and you didn't see another car coming. You hear a horn. That could be something you miss out on. On a more personal level, chatting with your kids, hearing them play their first guitar chord, something like that. You can miss out on all those kind of things. TV. Music, all the things you kind of take for granted from your day-to-day life.
You're going to be giving a presentation in the fall, I understand, on the true cost of noise-induced hearing loss. So are some of the things that you've just mentioned the true cost?
Yeah, I think ultimately that's the price that someone pays for exposure to excessive exposure to noise. It's unfortunately, it happens just in time for your retirement. The golden years you're always hoping for when you get older. They're going to be greatly diminished if you don't take care of your hearing over your career.
All right. Well, Aaron, thank you for your time today.
No problem. It was a pleasure.
That's Aaron Jones. He's industrial hygienist with the Prevention Services Department of Workplace NL. You're listening to The Signal on CBC Radio 1. We're talking about tinnitus. And if you have a question about tinnitus, maybe you have personal experience with this condition, you can text us, email us, or call. The numbers to call are 1-800-563-8255 or 709-722-7111. You can also text us 709-327-8206. Send us an email, thesignal@cbc.ca. We have two guests with us through the show today, and in studio in St. John's we have Andrea Augo. She is with the Canadian Hard of Hearing Association, Newfoundland and Labrador, and she has tinnitus. And we are also joined by Taylor Burt, an audiologist and president of the Newfoundland and Labrador Association of Speech Language Pathologists and Audiologists. Andrea, I want to come to you. You were just listening as Aaron Jones was speaking about hearing loss generally, but also acknowledging that tinnitus can sometimes be an issue and a reason for a workplace injury claim. Is there anything that you heard there that you'd like to pick up on, perhaps, or any comment you'd like to make?
Well, the comment that I like to make with regards to that, and I stress it to people, is you don't know if you will develop hearing loss. So all of us are, some people may be more predisposed to hearing loss than others. So let's say one person is mowing the lawn, for example, for say half hour, so 30 minutes mowing the lawn, and a lawnmower is probably between 90 to 95 decibels, and another person is mowing the lawn for the same amount of time, but gradually. Hearing loss happens so gradual that it's not going to happen overnight for most people. So it's years later before it presents itself. So it may happen for one person, but it may not happen for the other person. So really, we all need to be aware of that, and to be aware of our hearing. And our ears are not a good judge of how loud something is. So we really, really need to protect our hearing in those situations. So I've done a lot of presentations over the years to students, and I describe as well. Okay, a blender is very loud. So a blender is 85 decibels. So anything louder than a blender for 8 hours a day, very likely that you could develop hearing loss. So it's the repetition and the amount of time that you listen to something. So it's better to take care of your hearing so that you don't risk it, because it is life-changing.
Taylor Burt with the Newfoundland and Labrador Association of Speech-Language Pathologists and Audiologists. Anything that you heard there from Erin Jones of Workplace NL that stood out for you?
Yeah, I think it's important to certainly report those instances where you think you might be suspicious if you're exposed to workplace noise to, your occupational health and safety board or your occupational health and safety representative, because that can be the thing that triggers that assessment. And that assessment is really the key to implementing some of those controls that he mentioned in your workplace. So he mentioned the engineering controls where we can investigate to see, is there quieter machinery that we can employ or use, or can we attach sound dampening pads or other kind of walls, structures to mimic or to minimize that sound? Or can we do another type of control, like an administrative control, where we shorten a shift or have it so that somebody is working perhaps half their shift in the noisy environment and half their shift out in an office somewhere where they're not exposed to noise. Or we can get down to kind of our last resort, as he mentioned there, which is your actual personal protective equipment, your earbuds, your ear muffs, things like that. And certainly, another really important point that I don't think a lot of people consider is making sure that you have proper use of that personal protective equipment. If those earmuffs are on your head, but half of the time you've only got one ear covered because you want to listen out for something important, then you're not protected. If the earbuds are in your ears, but they're not pushed in all the way properly, then you're not protected to the degree that you need to be. So even if the workplace has those controls in place, you've still got to make sure that you're taking the effort to protect yourself.
You're listening to The Signal on CBC Radio 1. Our next guest has tinnitus as well. Grant Etchegary is a musician and retired teacher, and he joins us on the line now. Good afternoon, Grant.
Hello, Bernice.
Tell us about your experience with tinnitus. When did you develop it?
Ooh, it would have, I have a sense that it started early in my life. As you pointed out, I'm a musician, and maybe exposure to playing rock music or listening to music at a loud level may have had some impact. But I think I've had it for some time, but it was very much in the background. Really, when it became an issue was probably about 5 years ago, when somewhat of a traumatic, event had occurred, and it really created a huge spike in my tinnitus. And if I may, let me just describe it. It's a tone that is at 8,000 hertz, so it's fairly high. It's consistent. It's profound. It is always ever present. The only change in it is from day to day is its intensity. And some days it can be soft to the point where, it's not really perceived. But, then there are other days when it can be really loud and often things like stress and, and maybe some anxiety can often create a higher spike. I think one of the things that we sometimes forget to talk about is not just the actual physicality of having tinnitus, it's the impact that it has on a person. And, it's really difficult for people to empathize with people who have tinnitus because, as has been pointed out earlier, nobody's really, they haven't heard it. It's not something that they can touch, feel, hear. It's something that's perceived within the brain. And, it's really, really difficult for people to understand what exactly it's like. And it can be stressful on a whole bunch of levels. But for me, it's something that, I've learned to live with, and I've habituated somewhat to it so that I can function in life.
And what are some of the things that you use, some of the ways that you do deal with the symptoms so that you're distracted from the tinnitus?
Yeah, distraction is an interesting word because I'm never distracted by it. I think I know it's always there. The question is, what impact does it have on me in terms of my mental health? With distraction by doing things, going out for walks, exercising, occupying your mind really helps an awful lot. I think sleep has a great role to play. Getting good quality sleep is very important. And I've also gone out for some treatments. There's no cure for tinnitus, and the research, frankly, is fairly infantile. It's not a real attractive physical condition, I guess. So a lot of money, is not spent on the research. So there is no cure. There's once your hearing goes, it's gone. And I think this is what I've really tried to impress upon people over time is the fact that, man, if you don't take care of yourself, if you don't take care of your hearing, you're gonna lose it, and you're gonna develop a condition like what I have, and life is going to be miserable. And there is nothing that you can do about it. So I've had several types of treatments. Tinnitus retraining therapy, which is a fairly popular one. There's a new one, I guess new, perhaps 5 years old. A treatment, the sound therapy that was developed by Lanier, which is a company in Dublin. They've had some good results. I've tried acupuncture. I've tried a variety of things, to help me in my journey. And really, I've just come to grips with the fact that it is what it is. And I think about the fact that, I'm not going to die from this. And I know that there are people in a lot worse places than I am that unfortunately gives me some help, in terms of dealing with the condition.
All right, Grant, thank you very much for your time today. We really appreciate you sharing your story with us.
My pleasure.
That's Grant Etchegaray, a musician, retired teacher, and someone who has tinnitus. Taylor, we don't have a psychologist with us today, so we'll say that right off the bat. You are an audiologist, but what do you hear from your patients about the psychological toll of hearing a roar or a ringing or a buzzing without any relief?
It as Grant said there, it can be really a profound impact on your mental health in that, it's constant, it's unrelenting. So it can sometimes feel very much like you're fighting a losing battle because the next time that you wake up or the next time that it's quiet enough that is going to come raging back. And another really good point that he made there is tinnitus is very much tied to the stress in our lives. So he had mentioned there that, he had a traumatic event happen and all of a sudden the tinnitus went through the roof. And where it is, a perceived sound that can be linked to medical conditions, but is ultimately related to you and very much to your mental state. Increased stress, whether that's for, emotional stress, even physical stress, like going through other medical issues and things like that can cause the tinnitus to be worse. And there's other research approaches similar to the things that he had mentioned just then about mindfulness. And mindfulness is a huge topic now in the psychology stratosphere. But there are some people who are getting relief through those techniques, being present in the moment. You'll see the apps with relaxation noises and things like that are finding, help and that for their tinnitus in particular.
Andrea, I want to ask you, I know you and I spoke a few days ago and you talked about how you've learned through the years what some of your triggers are, what makes your tinnitus worse. Can you talk a little bit about what you've discovered?
Yes, so over the years, I've basically learned that there are certain things. So my tinnitus is basically constant. So it's there, it's in the background, just like Grant's. There are some triggers that will make it louder, and to a point where it's difficult for me to hear what someone is saying. So it's a little bit challenging for me to have a conversation with someone, for example, because the tinnitus is so overpowering and is so loud in my head. So some of my triggers would be stress. Definitely. So if I'm under a lot of stress, that is a trigger. Another trigger is fatigue. So if I don't get a good night's sleep, the chances are the tinnitus is going to be louder the next day, which stresses me out because I'm literally trying to tell myself I have to go to sleep. I have to get a good night's rest so I don't get tinnitus, so I can function the next day. That doesn't happen very often, but sometimes. Another trigger that I've noticed is caffeine. So for me, I have to have my coffee in the morning. It's my go-to. And however, some days I like to have a second cup of coffee. So that's where I'm taking a risk. So if I have 2 cups of coffee, then there's a chance that it could trigger it. Now, sometimes it doesn't, and if I'm happy after the second cup of coffee and I'm like, in the afternoon, I want another cup, well, okay, I'll have another cup, but guaranteed the next day or right away, I'm probably triggering the tinnitus. It becomes very challenging to have a conversation with someone. Also, I've noticed one of the, my doctor prescribed a certain type of medication for me, and I won't say the name of it because it may not impact other people. So it's just me. So one of the medications, very common, and I started taking it, and right away, there was this really high-pitched sound. And so it just stayed with me while I was taking it, and I went back to my doctor, and I said, I can't take this. It's triggering the tinnitus, so is there something else you can give me? So thankfully, she prescribed something else, and that tinnitus is gone.
We're talking about tinnitus today on The Signal. The next person we're going to hear from also has had tinnitus for many years. Greg Janes is a veteran of the Canadian Forces. Good afternoon, Greg.
Hi, Bernice. Good day. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
How long have you had tinnitus, and what does it sound like for you? What's your experience?
I'm 52 now, so I developed tinnitus when I was in my early 20s, when I joined the military. And I would explain it as when the broadcasting system will go off on your TV, you hear that buzzing, loud buzzing noise. That's what it is for me. It's always a constant, loud, buzzing noise for 24/7. So as you can imagine sitting with that for any amount of time, that's what I lived with every day. So it wasn't until in the 90s when I joined in 89, there wasn't a real, hearing protection because we're always listening for orders and things like that, the yelling and screaming when it goes in, and we could be exposed to tank fire, artillery, small arms fire, grenades. That's what we experience in the military, and that could be very prolonged. So at about 85 to 90 decibels is the norm. But when I was posted to the ship, I joined the Royal Canadian Navy. I spent 20 years in the Navy. we'd done a sound study on the ship, and we tried to get our numbers down. It was impossible to get our numbers down below 100 decibels. That it was either too expensive, or you just couldn't change the equipment, or it's just the environment that we worked in from day and night. So there is no quiet space on the ship. So when the ship hits the jetty and you come ashore, and you had this loud noise in your head, because the way I deal with it, there's always a radio on in my house somewhere. I'm constantly listening to white noise. And if I had to sit in silence, it's really a nuisance to me. And it really, really does bug me. So I had this investigated furthermore, and, my hearing is low, and so I had hearing aids to help me out. And it did take away some of that tinnitus and brighten the other sounds around me. I was really, really amazed of how much these hearing aids were helping me. I could hear things, I didn't have a struggle in a conversation, because if there were 3 to 4 people in a conversation, I'd be lost. And what was really difficult during COVID, the masks were on, and I was able to read the lips. So that was really, really difficult for me, because I'll always be paying attention to the lips in a conversation. If I couldn't see your lips move, I was in left field. Yeah, so...
Greg, was there a particular point in time when you noticed the symptoms started?
Yeah, we were on an exercise in Suffield, Alberta, and it was quite a large exercise, and a large explosion went off in our area. And when I got over the initial concussion, it felt like there was fluid coming out of my ears. I felt like my ears were bleeding. And, and after this, when we got in this quiet space, I was, thinking that it was just noise related from the explosion. But this persisted after days and days until I got it checked out. So right now where I'm to, that is I live with a severe tinnitus in my ears. Sometimes it will cut in to really, really severe, where I can't hear anything out of my right ear. So I'm always going around, trying to hear out of my left. So anytime I mow the lawn now or anything like that, or ear protection is the key right now. And knowing that this is a preventable, illness or whatever, it's all preventable. Because if we wore the right ear defenders or the, ear protection at the time, I wouldn't be dealing with this right now. But it was, there wasn't much research. There wasn't much known about noise and how it affects the effects that it has on a person back then. And when it did come in, the noise studies and everything like that, we found that, wearing ear defenders, you can't shut out all the noise. You have to listen for alarms. You have to listen for the PA systems and things like that. So you're constantly surrounded by these high noise levels all the time. And for me, it's been very debilitating, that because it caused migraines. I wake up at night, and if it's silence, that it's really, really bad, really deafening to me, and it's hard sometimes even to get my bearings.
Greg, thanks so much for telling us about your experience, and also telling us about some of the things that work for you, some of the things that you use to mask and cope with tinnitus. So thanks very much for your time today.
You're welcome, Bernice. Thank you for having me on.
We have another caller on the line. It's Dick Whitaker calling in from Portugal Cove, St. Phillips. Good afternoon, Dick. Hello, Dick. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I'm hearing you loud and clear.
Okay. I just want to say I've had tinnitus for a number of years, and I found that knocking back on the salt intake helps a bit.
Interesting. And how did you discover that, Dick?
I think I found it on either on the internet, or else I was talked to a doctor somewhere along the line.
And Dick, how do you cope with having tinnitus? Are there things that you do other than reducing your sodium intake to be able to cope?
No, most of the time it's not too bad, so I'm okay.
All right.
It's just a noise in the background these days. It's years and years, because I used to be farming, as you probably know, and I didn't use earplugs because I wanted to hear what was going on with the machinery behind me and all the rest of it.
For sure.
Which tells you, when you're in trouble or try to avoid it as much as possible.
All right. Well, Dick, thanks very much for taking the time to call in and tell us about your experience.
Yeah, thank you very much. Take care.
That's Dick calling in from Portugal Cove, St. Phillips. I want to come back to our guests that we have with us today. First of all, I know that Taylor Burt will soon have to leave. Taylor Burt is an audiologist and president of the Newfoundland and Labrador Association of Speech-Language Pathologists and Audiologists. Taylor, are you still with us, first of all?
Yes, still here.
And I want to say thank you for being with us today. Is there anything you want to add to the people that, the comments that we've just heard from several of the people we've heard from in this half hour?
I think the only thing, I guess, I'm trying to part on a little bit more of a positive thought. And it's, tinnitus is this kind of famous thing that there is no cure, in that there's no pill to take that's going to magically make it disappear. But like we've heard from several people today, there are several different ways that we can get you back to having a better quality of life. So whether that's cutting down on salt or caffeine, or making sure that you have enough sleep, or in the case of actual clinical interventions like hearing aids and those tinnitus maskers that people had mentioned today that are usually actually in a hearing aid itself. Or even the therapy strategies, like one of the guests mentioned there, tinnitus retraining therapy and sound therapy. While they may not work for every single person because tinnitus is so individualized, I would, caution people not to get too discouraged because it may just work for you.
All right. Taylor, thank you very much. I know you have a patient that you have to get to at 1 o'clock, so we'll let you go and continue with your day as a clinician. Thank you so much for your time with us.
Thank you so much, Bernice. It was great to talk to you today.
That's Taylor Burt. She's an audiologist and president of the Newfoundland and Labrador Association of Speech-Language Pathologists and Audiologists. Our guest in studio in St. John's today is Andrea Ago. She is coordinator of client services with the Canadian Hard of Hearing Association. She also has hearing loss and tinnitus herself. Andrea, maybe you can talk a little bit about the kind of work that you do at the Canadian Hard of Hearing Association that might be of benefit to someone who has tinnitus.
Yes, so our programs and services with regards to tinnitus has evolved over the years. Our association started, back in 1984, and, in the 1990s, there was a tinnitus resource group that started up, and then it carried on. So it started out with a small group of people that had a passion for sharing their experiences with other people to help them. And one of the instrumental people in sustaining that group was Brian Marshall. And Brian, I'm sorry, I get a little bit emotional talking about Brian because he passed away in April.
I'm so sorry, Andrea.
I wasn't expecting to talk about him today, but he was really instrumental in sharing his story and his treatments with tinnitus. He also had Meniere's disease as well. So Brian was the most beautiful person I've ever met, and so caring and wanting to help people. So the group basically evolved, and he would have, a group of people. It could be, say, 5 to 10 people at a time. And he would come to our office in the evenings, and, they would sit around and they would talk about the impact that the tinnitus was having on them, and, some strategies that they've learned. So it was like, it was a positive group that they helped each other. And then the group, as technology evolved, the internet became more readily available and everything. People were using the internet to find information about tinnitus. The group got smaller and smaller, so we weren't able to attract new members. So that's when we had conversations with Brian about, what can we do to educate people about tinnitus and be supportive. So we came up with basically, let's do some online resources. So Brian, there's actually a video of Brian being interviewed by one of our past coworkers, and if you like to take a look at that video, it's a very candid interview of Brian sharing his experiences with tinnitus and the impact that it's had on him and some things that he's tried. So that video would be on our website and also on our YouTube channel.
Okay, so chha-nl.ca is your website. I want to give that out so that people can find their way to you.
Definitely, yep. And then the group just evolved from that, and now what we offer is resources on our website about tinnitus and what you can do. Also, I will say that I have been getting a lot of calls with regards to tinnitus. So I'm sort of like the first point of contact when people call into our office. They'll call me, looking for information about it. They've been to their doctor says there's nothing that they can do. They're feeling discouraged. So, I'll provide some peer support to them, just as I am doing today, sharing my story and, what can help and some solutions. And I'll also refer people to, maybe it's an audiologist that deals with tinnitus, or maybe it's tinnitus retraining therapy. So it's offering solution that is, might help that person, so that they can make an informed decision. And also, if the person wants to be connected to another person that has tinnitus, there's real power in connecting with someone who's experiencing what you're experiencing. So Grant Edgegary is actually one of the persons that has agreed. So I will put people in contact with Grant, and then Grant will give them the call, and they'll have a great chat. There's a video of Grant also on our website. We'll do webinars throughout the year about tinnitus with expert guest speakers. We have resources on our website, and we also have a lending program so people can borrow sound conditioners. So for anyone that doesn't have a cell phone or a smartphone that has those apps on them, they can borrow an actual sound conditioner that can help them sleep better so that they can sort of listen to a different sound, not the sound that's in their head.
Andrea, it's so helpful to get some tips on how to manage living with tinnitus for sure. I had a couple of messages sent to me on social media. I'm just going to read those before we say goodbye. Ashley Patton wrote me to say, I have tinnitus. I have had it since I was 24. I'm 39. I have to get therapy to cope with it and its impact. I've had to use sound masking devices, white noise machines, to help cope with the noise. Sandy Wiseman Yates wrote me to say, I have had this disorder for around 15 years with worsening hearing loss as well. Finally, last year, after many years and an audiologist's recommendation, I got hearing aids, the best investment I have ever made for myself. The hearing aids have also helped decrease my tinnitus when I use them. Needless to say, they only come out of my ears when I'm sleeping or in water. So I'm thinking, Andrea, you've probably heard those kinds of comments many times over the years in your work.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I've heard all of that. Actually, one very recent thing, and I'm always learning, I'd love to learn about people's experiences and the impact and what they found helpful.
Andrea, I will caution you, we're coming to the end of the show, so maybe just a final comment.
Yes.
We'll leave it there. Andrea, we have had lots to say, and you have been so
Perfect.
helpful to be with us through this time. I really appreciate you being in studio with us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
That's Andrea Ago. She is coordinator of client services with the Canadian Hard of Hearing Association, and she's been speaking from personal experience as well. You can check out their website, chha-nl.ca. Tomorrow on The Signal, we'll be talking about cell service, dead zones, dropped calls, service that's worse in some cases than it used to be. We're going to ask you what cell service is like in your part of Newfoundland and Labrador.